right, so I'm just going to close the door slightly to reduce the noise, and I will be right back. All right, y'all, so thank you so much for being here. We're going to go ahead and get started. I just want to kind of let you know that this was going to be a co-presentation with my colleague Raiida Thompson, but Raiida will be in a little bit later. She had to meet with someone, and so just know that she might come in a little bit later and join us. This session is going to be more, we're going to share some information with you, but also we're going to invite you to ask any questions that you might have about interviewing. Maybe you're getting prepared for an interview that's coming up, or you have questions about maybe how to answer certain questions that you've been asked and whatnot. So just know that it will be interactive. We will share some information, but again, the goal here is that you're able to ask questions and let us know, like, hey, I went to an interview and they asked me this question and I didn't know how to answer. And so how can I answer it better next time, right? And that's the whole point, is to kind of have a dialogue with you all. And so in terms of what we're going to talk about today, I'll introduce myself. I'll have you all introduce yourselves as well, if you can. And then also we'll talk about tips before your interview, what to do, once you've been asked and invited to come and interview for a company or an organization, the tips during the interview, and then tips after the interview. And then we'll move into an open discussion, right? And so again, my name is Jorge Murillo. I work under a Hispanic Serving Institution grant that Mission College received from the U.S. Department of Education. And part of my role is to support Latinx and low-income STEM majors with some career readiness, as well as other programming that we do to support students through our grant. And again, I was going to be joined by my colleague Raiida Thompson, who works under an AANAPISI grant, which is a similar type of grant, but with a focus on Asian and Native American Pacific Islander students. And so she'll be joining us hopefully later. I'd also like to invite Andrew to say hello. Andrew is running our career services center, or our career services here at Mission, and he's a great resource, and I'll kind of talk about some of that later.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Jorge's going to do an awesome presentation. If you have any questions about the Career Services Center, we could save that at the very end. But thank you again for tuning in, and we're going to have a great session.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, so let's get into the presentation. All right, the first slide is basically saying, yay, you've been invited for an interview at a job, right? You applied, you went through the application, you did your research, right? And so now you've been invited to interview for this company, right? And so really there's, the now what, right? So what do I do now? Now that I've been invited, I've confirmed the appointment. What should I do to get ready to go and talk to this company about my skills, my experience, right? And then most importantly too, another question is, how do I stand out from the rest, right? And so kind of, how do I make myself stand out? How do I make an impact in an interview so that you can land a job? And hopefully it's your dream job, right? Or it could be something that you're doing while you're in school in preparation for your career later on, right? And so I think one of the important things that we wanted to share with you is that when you go into an interview, one of the key things that you should really do for yourself in any interview, it could be for school, for an internship, for a job, right, is to do some reflection and really ground yourself in knowing yourself, if that makes sense, right? So here's some questions that you could ask yourself, right? What problems do I like to solve, right? And it could be, for me, for example, I work in education. So one of the problems I like to solve in my work is students' access to education, right? I like to make sure that students have access to college, information about college, information about financial aid, information like this, right? This is problems that I like to solve, right? Which classes do I enjoy the most, right? And so really kind of grounding yourself in what is it that I like about the classes I'm taking, what subjects, why do I like those things? What skills do I like using the most, right? For example, myself, I really love graphic design, making flyers and things like that. And so I know that I have that skill and I like using that, right? And then what do other people say I'm good at, right? So thinking about, say, old teachers or counselors or people maybe you have worked with or even your friends, right? They say, man, you're really good at public speaking, or you're really good at organizing things, right? Say, you know, for example, I'm a friend that whenever I take a trip with my friends, I'm the organizer. I'm booking the hotel. I know these things about myself and my friends tell me as well, right? And so these reflection questions are a way for you to really understand yourself and understand the skills that you bring to an organization, and to give yourself confidence, right? Give yourself some kudos on what kind of skills you're bringing into those spaces, right? And so another thing is, right, finding the relationship and the intersection between what you do well, what you enjoy doing, and then what others say that you do good, right? And so these, again, these are really good grounding questions to ask yourself and know about yourself, so that when you go into an interview, you feel confident, you feel really aware of yourself, right? And bringing that kind of energy into those interviews and really knowing how to market yourself, right? So again, these are reflections, just kind of questions for you to ask yourself before going to an interview, right? And so what else should you do before you go to an interview? The number one thing that I always suggest is when a person, you know, an HR person or a recruiter reaches out and says, hey, we'd like to interview, it's important to respond promptly. I've had friends who, for whatever reason, they're not really sure about it, or they like to, you know, kind of play this weird game with recruiters. It doesn't come off as really good, right? So you really want to make that first impression to show that you're eager, that you're interested, and responding promptly, right? You don't have to respond, you know, right away in 5 minutes, but at least within 24 hours that they reach out. Maximum 48 hours, because then you're kind of pushing it. And it really shows a sign of respect for their time, right? Because sometimes they're maybe scheduling multiple interviews for multiple positions. And the faster they're able to get you down, the easier you're making their work, right? The more conscientious you are to their time, right? The second thing, once you speak to them, you get your interview, you know, you confirm with them, is to collect and organize all of the important information you're going to need for that interview, right? So making sure that you add it to your calendar and set reminders for yourself, even at least 3 days in advance, so you don't forget, right? If you're someone who's really busy, you have a demand, say you're working and you're going to school, but you're still trying to interview for a new job, adding the appointment or the interview into your calendar is going to be really key, right? Another thing is, in your calendar reminders, include the address, the contact person, their phone number or email, and then obviously like the building and room number. Because what you don't want to do is show up to a location and you're scrambling in your emails or your notes and you can't find where you're supposed to go, right? So really doing the work ahead of time so that process goes smoothly. For an in-person interview, I always suggest that you really map out ahead of time using Google Maps or Waze or whatever app you use to give you directions, to calculate how much time it will take to get you there, the kind of parking situation it might be, or even the public transportation. If you're using public transportation, you know, where's the nearest bus stop? Where's the nearest BART station, or, you know, Caltrain or whatnot, right? And so that way, again, you're doing that work ahead of time. You kind of have an idea of the commute or the parking situation. For example, I've interviewed a few times in San Francisco, and their parking can be hit or miss. So I always left at least 40 minutes before my interview to look for parking, right? And so just kind of being conscious of those things. Let's say your interview is over Zoom, which is, you know, pretty common nowadays. Making sure that you have the Zoom link saved and ready to go. Again, you don't want it to be, you know, your interview's at 12:50, or I'm sorry, 12 p.m. and at 12:50 you can't find the Zoom link, right? That's going to put you in an anxious space, in a worried space, and it can affect how you show up. And how you manage that interview. So again, doing that work ahead of time, having it ready to go, so those things are out of the way. Right. The third tip is to research the company or the organization. And the reason that we put asterisks there is because, you know, before you even apply to certain jobs, you should be researching what you're applying to, where you're applying at, right? And particularly the mission, the vision, and the values of that company or an organization, right? You should at least have a good sense of what that is, right? What they talk about, what they do as a company or organization, why they do it, and the position that you're applying for, how does that fit within that, right? And so it does seem like a lot of work, but I promise that when you go into an interview and you've done that research, you have a good sense of what they do and who they are as a company, you're going to feel much more confident, right? And that will help a little bit later when we talk about developing questions that you want to prepare for the interview, right? The fourth thing is to study the job description closely. Again, this is something you should have done before even applying, but just rereading the job description again. Right? Making sure that you understand the responsibilities and looking at keywords within a job description that kind of gives you an idea of what you're interviewing for, and the kind of words or language, or even digging into your own experience to pull out, right? And so this next slide is kind of an example. Again, you should have done this before you applied and you incorporated some of these keywords into your resume. But in looking at the job description again, finding the keywords, right? So you can see in the first bullet point that it says organize and maintain department event calendar, right? So organization, maintenance of calendars, schedules, and whatnot, you're gonna know that that is a big role. That's a big piece of the job, right? You'll notice in the third bullet point, again, scheduling and Outlook. So you know that this position is going to be handling a lot of calendar scheduling. And so kind of thinking of your own experience, you know, how did you do that in previous jobs, or how did you do that as a student, right? So let's say you don't have work experience. Using your experience as a student to say, yeah, you know, every time I get my syllabus, I go and I plug in all the important due dates in my calendar, right? Or I plug in all like holidays, right? How do you use calendars to organize yourself? And so again, this is just a quick example of how you could look at a job description to pull out keywords so that you can remember and reflect and also prepare as before you go in. So again, some more tips to prepare, right? One of the big, sometimes, and I've been on a lot of hiring committees, there's a really big missed opportunity that people basically miss, right? When they don't ask questions, right? And this is gonna be an important part of your research, right? You wanna research the organization, you wanna research the positions, so that way you can come into that interview with questions about the position. You want to ask them about the organization, the position, the culture, right? What is the work culture like? And opportunities for growth, if that's something that you're interested in, or that you value in somewhere that you work at, right? And then again, these questions should really show the interviewer or the employer that you did your research, that you know about their company, their organization, and you're kind of there also interviewing them, right? Because, you know, it could be that they say, yeah, the culture is here. They share something about their work culture that doesn't really sit with you. And you can decide, you know what, maybe this organization isn't for me, right? Or maybe I'll keep looking, right? And so again, just doing that research is going to help you formulate questions, thoughtful questions, questions again that are going to make you stand out, right? And there's another note before that. Many times they'll give you at the end of your interview, they'll give you an opportunity to ask questions, right? You should really ask the thoughtful questions first before, well, I should say you should kind of, in that opportunity to ask questions, you should avoid questions about the salary, about the schedule, or the application timeline, right? Leave that to the very end if you need to ask, right? But first ask those meaningful, insightful questions. And then later you could say, okay, now that I've asked my questions, can I learn more about, say, the timeline about this, right? The sixth tip is to practice, right? And we put that 3 times, practice, 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 because it is really important. If you're somebody who gets nervous, right, which is totally natural, it's totally normal to get nervous before interviews. The more you practice in the mirror, the more you practice with, say, a friend or a partner, right, it kind of helps your brain reduce that anxiety or that unknowing of like, I don't know what's going to happen, right? If you practice your, say, some answers to common questions, one of the most common questions is like, tell me about yourself, right? Practicing how to share about yourself, how to talk about yourself, how to talk about your skills, what you like, what you're good at, that really pays off, right? And it can be awkward to do a practice or mock interviews, but they really pay off, right? And so just a quick note about that as well. If you would like to practice interviewing, we're having a mock interview event today, both on Zoom and in person. It will be from 4:30 to 6 p.m. today. And we still have some spots for students. So if you'd like to participate in a mock interview, practice interview, we have an event today, right? The last thing that we'll say before you know, the tips for before an interview is to prepare for the day of, right? Like, you know, like how kids set up their clothes on the bed the day before school starts. You could do that too for your interview, right? Pick an outfit, make sure that you are prepared in that way, right? And then just kind of a note about that. So what should you wear to an interview, right? Especially if it's an in-person interview, you know, you're gonna do the full outfit. If it's on Zoom, you know, just the waist up mostly, right? But before you go out and buy anything, I always tell people, look at, check your own clothes, right? Is there something you already have that can work for an interview? And this chart kind of gives you a good sense of what business casual looks like on the your left-hand side, and then what professional wear or attire looks on the right-hand side, right? And so just kind of finding what you have that could fit either or, and then also most importantly, find something that makes you, that is comfortable and that makes you feel confident. Right. One time I made the mistake of wearing a shirt that was too tight, and that was all I could think about when I was in the interview. It's like, oh my God, my shirt is so tight. And so just kind of remember that, right? Go with comfort, but also kind of with respect to the professionalism, right? Showing them that you are, that you're thoughtful about how you present yourself. Because at the end of the day, we all represent the companies or the organizations that we work at. And so an interview is an opportunity for you to show them, hey, I know how to represent myself well as an organization, right? And so if, for example, say you have an upcoming interview and you need some clothes, we have the career closet here at Mission College, and Andrew he runs the career closet where you can get good clothes for interviews for free, right? And so just know that there are resources here at Mission to support that. So again, if you have an upcoming interview and you need something professional to wear, check out the career closet first before you go out and buy anything, right? And also check your own clothes too. So I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions. So we went a lot over what to do before an interview. So
Jorge, we had Geraldine ask if there's any questions that you might recommend them asking when the employer asks them if they have any questions.
Yeah, so I'll share that I've been in interviews where I've been asked, like I was interviewing and I've been asked like, what do you like most about working here? And that's a good opportunity because humans, we like to talk about ourselves, right? And so that gives the interviewer an opportunity to share why they like it. The only thing about that though is that, again, we represent our organization. So I would never say anything negative to a candidate, right? And so you kind of got to gauge how honest they can be in their responses when you ask a question. But it could be another question like, hey, I noticed on the website that it says that you all do, say, community service as a part of this company. What does that look like and what kind of opportunities will I have to do community service? If it's something that you're interested in. Or, especially nowadays, right? What is the work culture like with, say, hybrid work? That's a big thing, right? How am I going to be allowed to, have some hybrid schedule, right? And again, just, from your research, whatever you find of that organization or the position, using that opportunity to ask them what kind of questions, right? And so, yeah, I hope that answers your question. But again, it kind of depends on your field, on the field that you work in. Again, I work in education. So if I interview anywhere, I want to ask about like, how do you support certain students? Certain, what kind of professional development opportunities are there to grow my own knowledge about this field? And what kind of support or mentorship would I get? What kind of training is there? Things like that, right? So just kind of figuring out how am I going to be supported? What kind of structures are there that are going to help me be supported? I hope that answers your question, Geraldine. Any questions here?
Yeah. Like in some interviews, trying to ask what I was trying to like sometimes a lot about this, but what about the weakness?
Yeah. So somebody in here asked that, sometimes in interviews, you get asked, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And they're asking, what should I say about my weaknesses? That's really tricky. The way that I always tell students or people really just in general is that when you talk about, say, your weaknesses, have it be more positive, right? Take a positive tone to it. Because, for example, and it's one of the things that I remember I have said in the past in an interview is like, sometimes I get really focused on a project or on something that I'm working at. And I tend to not either overwork, right? Or I tend to be so in the zone that I forget to acknowledge people or say hi, right? And so I'll just say sometimes I get really focused, I get really into this work that I can forget to say hi, but I'm working on that, right? Or I've been working on that. And give an example, right? So, I can't think of an example now, but making sure that it's positive, right? And again, when you do practice, right? When in preparation for the interview, those are the kinds of things that you want to practice, right? If they're going to ask me about my weaknesses, how can I do it in something more positive? And I'll ask Raiida if Raiida has anything to share.
That's a great way to approach it. You could also think about something that you would like to improve on. For example, I'm not very good at Excel. And let's say I get an interview where Excel, I need to have better skills than I have in Excel. I could be honest about that and say, the weakness that I've seen out of that is that my Excel skills are, modest. And I could see how I can improve on that, and that would be my goal and purpose from now on, or moving forward. I would like to work on improving those skills of mine in Excel. It's okay to kind of like acknowledge that we have not a shortcoming, but we have an area that we would like to work and improve, and say that that's what I want to do moving forward. And it just shows honesty, it shows, for me, at least, it shows that you're honest and you're willing to learn and willing to improve. And that's what really encourages me for. They don't want to hire someone who's perfect, right? There's nobody who's perfect anyway. So they want to see that you are willing to learn and you're willing to grow as well.
Yes. So for those of you on Zoom, Raiida gave a really good suggestion, is to be honest, right? So let's say she used as an example of proficiency in Excel, right? So if you're not, say, the best at Excel, saying that during an interview, but also, again, emphasizing I'm willing to learn, I want to learn, and I want to improve this, right? And that could even be something that you use for a question later, right? So you could say, hey, if I wanted to take an Excel class, is there support for that, right? And so just kind of being mindful of making those connections and showing them, number one, that you're human, and number two, that you are willing to grow, right? And so we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next slide. So we kind of covered what to do before the interview, right? So let's talk about what to do during the interview, right? And so this one's important. The first one is pretty simple, but just kind of worth mentioning, is to avoid wearing strong colognes and perfumes, not because they don't smell good or, whatever. It's, just being conscientious that there are a lot of people with allergies to strong colognes or fragrances, right? And so just kind of being mindful of that. If you are going to do it, if it gives you more confidence, maybe spray before you put on your shirt, or just, maybe one spray, right? Versus like my younger brother, he puts on like 20 sprays, and we can smell them from across the street. But, just kind of being mindful of that, right? Another thing is to avoid distracting or heavy jewelry. It's okay to wear jewelry, but just make sure that it's not distracting. I remember one time I interviewed somebody, and they had their hands on the table, but they had these like really big jewelry things, and every time they would like get really excited about something, they would like slam their hands, and it was distracting, because it was like, whoa, every time it would happen, right? And so just kind of being mindful of that, right? And so that's one of the things, right? Another thing is plan on being there at least 20 minutes early. And by that, you really got to gauge yourself, right? If you know that, I know my older sister, she is very clear that she's like, you know what? I have a really bad concept of time. She thinks she could get anywhere in 15 minutes, which is not true, right? And so just kind of know like, hey, it really is a good first impression to be there on time. To, if you could be, say, in the office, in the office that you're supposed to be at least 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes before your interview starts. Just, if you can do that, and just be prepared and know that they might tell you, hey, you need to wait, right? Or so that way you say you don't bump into another candidate or something, right? So just kind of know, be conscientious to be there early, be there on time, right? At least 5 minutes in the space you're meeting with the person you need to, at least 5 minutes before the interview starts. Another thing that can seem simple or very common sense, right, is to smile and to greet people enthusiastically. Right, so you really want to show the people that you're excited to be there. Even if you're nervous, just kind of remind yourself to smile, right? Part of that is, number one, when you smile, you're sending happy signals to your brain, like, hey, let's be happy, let's be enthusiastic, but also to, there's, I don't know what it's called in psychology, but basically if you smile, you most likely will make the other person smile and in a better mood, right? Mirroring, right? And so just kind of being that mirror. And then another thing is, like, let's say you meet with somebody who's just completely not smiling or seems, like they might be in a bad mood, try your best not to let that then mirror them, right? Just keep to your composure, smile, and be enthusiastic. Another thing is to remember to breathe. The reason we say this is because sometimes when we get nervous, right, or we're anxious, without even realizing it, we're not breathing or we're holding our breath, right? And so it's only gonna kind of make us even more anxious or more nervous, right? And so just kind of reminding yourself, breathe, right? Breathe deeply, let your brain get as much oxygen that it can, because that's gonna improve your cognitive function, your ability to stay in the moment, and to kind of pace yourself, right? Because I've been in interviews where somebody's talking really, really fast and they're trying to answer the question. And really, if they would have just kind of focused on their breathing, they could have probably gone a little bit slower, and that's okay, right? Another thing is eye contact. And this is, I think depending on your culture, right? This could be a little bit tricky. Right. So I know that there are some cultures where eye contact, especially with somebody who's older than you, or strong eye contact, is not respectful. Right. And so just kind of being mindful that in professional I would say in the US and US American culture, eye contact in an interview is really important. Right. Especially, most of the interviews that I've done in my career have been in education. And so that usually is with multiple people. They do a lot of panel interviews. So you could be with 3 to 5 to 7 people that you're interviewing with, and learning how to answer questions and speak to all of them, right? And really making those eye contact. Right. We already talked about this, but to make sure that you ask questions, right? It's not always the best look if they get to the end and they say, okay, do you have any questions for us? And the person says, no, I don't. And they just walk out. Right? So it's kind of awkward, right? Again, when you ask questions, you're showing them that you did your research, that you're really interested in learning more about the organization and the position, and ask those meaningful questions, right? And then the last one is when you're done asking those meaningful questions, you can ask about next steps and timeline. Right. You don't want to go home after that interview and be like, oh my God, how long am I going to wait? What should I do? How long should I wait? Are they going to interview other people or things like that? Right. So just be okay with asking like, hey, what are the next steps and or a timeline? When will I hear back? Right. And that's totally okay to ask. And even if you don't ask, sometimes they'll tell you anyways. Right?
For the membership comment,
yeah.
I would like to add to that, because you mentioned the speaking fast, and sometimes they're nervous to speak fast in the interview. There's really no rule or no law that says you cannot just stop, take a deep breath, breathe, and just get kind of like a pause. And if you need to write notes down, sometimes students feel or think that you cannot bring anything. I mean, unless it's skill test, maybe you can, but if it's a regular event, you can bring in a notebook with you and just jot down your ideas first. After you ask the question, you can take a moment to pause, breathe, write down maybe highlights of the answer that you want to give to them, collect your thoughts, and deliver that answer. It's totally okay to do that in an interview. You shouldn't feel like the minute they finish asking the question, they have to write out the answer. A few seconds to think about it, write down something, use your notes, and answer the question.
Yeah, Raiida made a good point that during an interview, if, in terms of like the breathing piece, right, if you need to pause to think about a question that they asked, it's totally okay to do that, right? And on the next slide, she mentioned writing down notes, right? Make sure that you bring something with you, and we'll talk about that next on what to bring with you during an interview. But it is a really good point that you can stop. You can even ask if they can repeat the question, right? There's going to be some places that actually give you a copy of the questions to have in front of you, and some places won't, right? But if there's a question that you didn't understand, you're always welcome to say, can you repeat that again? Or can you repeat that? Sometimes there's like one question, but it has like 3 different parts. Right. And so being able to say, okay, what was the first part? What was the second part? Right. And so just kind of being comfortable, just know that you have that right to ask. And so again, just kind of wrapping up of what to do during the interview. Again, smile, look excited to be there, even if the interviewer doesn't. Try to, as much as possible, speak with a clear tone. And what we mean by that is, you know, I've been in interviews where just out of nervousness, I think people, they lower their tone or they get really nervous and they, you know, they don't really move their mouth. So it's hard to kind of hear them. And so that's where practice comes in, right? Practicing speaking, and just know that like interviews are almost like a performance, right? You're there to perform, right? It's like once the interview starts, it's like action, and you just, you know, you got to get into the zone of like, I'm here because I want this job. I'm selling myself as much as possible, right? And also being true to yourself. Another note is to interact positively with everyone, right? So sometimes you might go to an interview where they say, oh, you need to check in with Raiida in this office. And if you get there and you're like rude to Raiida, right? She's gonna tell those people, right? Or she might tell those people like, dang, that candidate was really rude. And no matter what you did or how you performed in that interview, like that weighs a lot, right? Because how you treat people is important. And so just remember that when say you're going into a company or a business, whenever you step into that door, interact positively with everyone, right? Be respectful in that way.
Because that's truly when the interview begins.
Yes.
The interview does not begin when you enter the understand that panels. It actually really begins the minute you enter the establishment, and the minute you start speaking with whoever gives you the questions. And our context is so true, because as much as the panelists would like to not be swayed by someone's opinion, just that small seed of doubt that somebody would say, oh my gosh, that probably was so rude when you walk into this office, that little thing will play a big role in their brains, even if they don't recognize that that's happening, right? So yeah, think about that. And because it's a performance, you mentioned that it's a performance, it is so important for you to be clear on your motivation and your goals and your desires to be in there. Like, why do you want that job? And I know what we've mentioned earlier about researching the place. That's when that's important, because if you don't have that down, like if you don't understand that motivation clearly, why you're there, why you want that job, that performance would be a really hard to do, and you will see through it.
Yes, thank you so much, Raiida. This is so true, right? And then so the last thing about this is to bring copies of your resume, just in case, you never know, a notebook and a pen, right? And again, it kind of goes back to what Raiida was sharing about being able to take notes, right? There have been interviews where you know, and this is not true for every field, but I've been in a lot of interviews where they give you the questions 10 to 15 minutes before the actual interview starts. And those are opportunities to kind of take notes and kind of brainstorm, right? And also it's an opportunity for you, once the interview ends, that you can kind of go back and take notes. Like, oh, what did you say, right? What worked, what didn't work? What do you want to work on? And most likely if you're, you know, in trying to stay in the same field, that counts, right? Just kind of remembering what they asked so that you can prepare next time. And so last, we're going to go ahead and talk about virtual interviews. So again, this is kind of, or this is not kind of, this has become a lot more common, you know, having interviews over Zoom or Google Meet or Skype, you know, whatever they use. So this is becoming a lot more common. So a lot of the in-person interview tips apply, right? Being enthusiastic, smiling, doing your research, getting all the information that you need, preparing your questions, but most importantly, with your virtual interviews is making sure that you check your audio, your microphone and video before, right? So before the interview starts, I mean, technology can kind of play a game on you in the moment, right? But doing as much as you can ahead to practice, right? So if you have a friend or a classmate who also has Zoom, or can help you, hey, can you help me check, make sure my mic is working, blah, 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 right? Do things like that before. Second is to choose a quiet place to interview, right? This is really important. right? And because I've been in an interview where it was on Zoom and the person was like at a work event and her coworkers walked in, and it's just really awkward, right? And so there was a lot of noise. It was really distracting, right? And so really, if you know, I have a cousin who lives in a house that's really loud, and she asked to use a friend's house, right? Hey, can I come over just for this interview for an hour? And it is kind of awkward, but just know, like, hey, it's gonna pay off, right? To ask. And also too, just know that there are, yeah, so just choose a quiet place to interview, right? Making sure that your Wi-Fi signal is strong, just, you know, checking. I know that for example, today Comcast sent me an email and they're saying, hey, we're going to be in your area working on the, you know, the internet connections, right? And so just keep an eye out for things like that. Any outages, going to places, or making sure your Wi-Fi signal is strong. And then again, before you even get into the interview, make sure you have all the details, all the Zoom link, all the information that you need. If you need a virtual background where you don't want them to see what's behind you, make sure you set that up before, right? There's ways to do that. And so, yeah, so we talked about a lot, y'all. We talked about a lot. So we went over a lot. And so what we want to do now is, again, just open it up to answer any questions you all might have about, say, you know, you have an interview coming up, or you had an experience at an interview that you want to explore how to do this, or how to do maybe better next time. So feel free to use the chat. And you guys are.
Why are you leaving your previous job? Oh.
What was the question?
Why you are leaving your previous job?
So the question is, why, sometimes you might be asked, why are you leaving your either current, or why did you leave your previous job?
I feel like, but first of all, if they do ask you that, then the best answer to offer to them is that we wanted more opportunities for growth, that we have gained as much skills and we learned as much as you needed to learn to perform that job well, that you're now ready to take those skills to the next level. I mean, that's probably the best answer to give. Although I really have a hard time, I don't think I've ever sat in an interview where they asked me that question. Have you?
No.
I don't think they can even ask you that question. Not that it's illegal, but I have a feeling that they may not, because in your resume, or when you fill out the application for the companies, they ask you where you have worked and for how long and the reason for it. So they would have that on the application anyway. A lot of applications have that set up. I would feel answer in a different way.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, I'm looking for more opportunities. Or you could say, like, you know, I really, because sometimes, you know, it happens where you start a job and like a month in and you're like, oh, I don't really like this, right? And so you start looking, right? And so it's hard to make the argument, well, I learned all I can, right? I have done everything I could. So in those situations, that's hard. I would, you know, if you could just say, like, I came across this opportunity with your company, and I did my research, and I think it fits more with what I'm looking for, what I want to experience. You know, and, you know, I think doing your research is really important, because then you could really say confidently, I really like your mission. It's really aligned with my mission, my values, and you know, I'm committed, right? I'm committed to being here a long time. I've accepted something else, but I feel much more called. I'm called to this position or this job. And if they accept that answer, then they accept it, and then if they don't, that's okay too, right? It's really up to them to accept that. Right? We never want to say, you know, I don't like my manager, right? You don't want to say that. You want to just kind of, again, positivity, positive spin. Geraldine and Isabel, any questions? Any reflections?
You don't have to- Anybody.
I'll stop sharing now.
I mean, guys, you guys have interviews coming up? No, just for day?
Yeah.
All right, Geraldine and Isabel. I'm gonna go ahead and put my email here in the chat. If you have any questions or want to reach out again, I believe, let's see. Yeah, if you want the PowerPoint or anything, feel free to either drop your email in the chat here, or you can email me directly and we can follow up. All right, just. Oh. Yeah, I'll actually let Andrew take that on. Any tips for the upcoming job fair? So just in case you don't know, there's a job fair coming up next week on the 26th. And so Andrew is leading that. He's bringing a bunch of employers on campus to do, to recruit, basically. They have all open positions, so.
Yes, thank you, Jorge. Got a little reverb. So definitely some tips, some big ones. I would say research the companies that are coming. The list is on Handshake, as well as if you go to the jobs.missioncollege.edu, that takes you to the page. They're all listed there. I would say research the companies. The kiss of death would be walking up to them and telling them, what do you do and what are you hiring for? Like that's already starting on a bad foot. And then definitely the other thing would be, oh, that pays too low. Do you have anything that pays more? Like, again, that's just a big no-no, that you're just asking the employers to like, oh, here's your resume in the garbage. So don't do that. Definitely come business casual. You don't have to spin clothes, as Jorge mentioned, that we have a career closet here on the 3rd floor of the Student Engagement Center. You could just email me to set up a time and we can go up there. Any clothes that you grab, you keep. And if you don't want them for any reason, you can recycle them at the Salvation Army or the Goodwill. Don't throw them away. Like I said, they're really good clothes. We have clothes even from our president. She gave us clothes that still had a tag on them. And she gave a lot of blazers, slacks, and shoes for our female population. And she said, I think she said her brother also has some business suits that they're going to donate soon. So these are clothes that are slightly used, I think, and in some cases with our president, she gave brand new clothes. So you could definitely look at those. In addition to that, also, we're going to have 18 employers. So there's going to be different employers. We're really focusing on business, engineering, child development, hospitality. But even within those employers, some like take, for instance, Santa Clara at the Hyatt, they have engineering positions, but they're known for hospitality. So that's where that research comes in to see the type of employers and industries and also what they're hiring for. You could also use Handshake to find the opportunities. So when you come to the table, you'll actually have some positions that they're hiring for, so you can actually speak on that. And also know their values, their mission, their goals, and see if that works for you, especially if you're looking for the company culture and the position. Be early. A lot of people are like, oh, I'll cast the last one. Around 2:30 to 2:45, I don't know, employers have ESP, I don't know, they just start packing up. I usually do a quick announcement, but come early, catch them fresh. If you come late, you might catch them when they already talked to 12 students and they're sucked out of energy, they're drinking coffee. So you want to catch them, and then definitely make sure, if you can, your resume. If it is 2 pages, make sure it's 2 separate pages. Don't do back to back. Recruiters don't know to turn it over and look, so they just, you might have some really good stuff on the second page, but if it's back to back, they might just circle a couple, talk to you about that, and not know you have all this great stuff in the back. Okay, that's another thing. And then what was the one more thing? There was one thing that I remember a student asked me, and I said, yeah, don't do that.
Students, employers.
As I mentioned, they're on the Eventbrite page, list of employers. Check that out. The registered students, I can send it out to the students. I'll probably send it out either, I think tomorrow. I'll send it out to the students that registered. Other than that, you can find it on the Eventbrite page as well as on Handshake in the events section. If you need help with the Handshake, make an appointment with me, we can go through that. And then of course, Jorge is going to send out the PowerPoint presentation. For yesterday's workshop, I know a lot of people asked for the recording. We weren't able to record, but Patty let me know if you email me or her, we can get you some of the information that she spoke of. Okay, thank you so much, Jorge. Let me know if there's any other questions. We had hundreds of employers, and Lucy, we told students, pick your A employer, your B employer, your C employer. So you're not waiting for that, just that one employer, and you waste the whole job fair, and then you don't get to hit the other one. So if your A employer, if the line's going through, out the door, then switch to your B employer, and so forth and so on. Okay, that way you get to get your resume out there, right? And make sure that if they have business cards, grab their business cards, because you can connect with them on LinkedIn, and then also start that dialogue with them. Let them know, hey, I met you at this job fair. I know you said you had these positions. Can I set a time to either meet through Zoom or through phone and discuss that more, or let them know if there's any opportunity you might have an open house or on-site visit where you can check out, because a lot of these employers are local. They're within driving distance. So you definitely want to build those relationships. If you are going to go to the four-year institutions, these practices that Jorge and Raiida and me are giving you, those are the standards that the CSUs and UCs follow. So we're trying to get you to step up, because the idea behind it is that when you go to those schools, you're going to be going head to head with your other students that came from other schools, but a lot of them might not have a substantial career center that's teaching them their skills. So we're trying to make you competitive. Same thing with Handshake. You know how to look for events, you know how to look for jobs, you know how to look for internship. Students that are coming from the high school level straight to the four-year, you're going to be competitive because you already know how to do that. All right, cool. Anything else, right? I'm forgetting? No. Okay, cool.
Hey y'all, sorry, my laptop died, just so you know.
What's your major? So
There's a lot of business internships in the database right now.
So like, I'm an international student, so
Yes.
we applied for CPD.
Yeah, so it's really cool. There's actually a setting inside Handshake that you can look just for those positions that are looking for OPT and CPT candidates.
So like, I still have one full semester for that. It's
Okay.
my first semester.
Okay.
So I should have that.
Well, you have to follow strict dates. You want to work with the international office because they can help you to identify the dates. I can help you find the jobs, but that I would say I'd leave it up to them. They're the experts on that. Yeah, I can't really guide you on that. That's their wheelhouse. But definitely if they say, yeah, now's a good time, jump on it and do it, and you come talk to me. And it's easy for me to spit out a list of those jobs and a nice little Excel sheet for you. So you don't even need to look, or you just look at the list. I want this one, this one, this one, and you apply. See, that's simple, right? Okay, cool. Anything else? I know you're laughing.
Yeah, right.
Cool, thank you guys. And then, like I said, we're gonna have mock interviews later. You still are gonna do super stops, and we're gonna have employers, right?
we're just gonna have one employer.
Oh,
We actually had more, but a lot of students registered.
tell your friends.
So, I don't know, I just- 4 employers.
Oh, nice.
Just only have 3 students registered.
Okay,
We give the option for the employers whether they want to come or not.
Okay.
And a lot of them.
no, they said this is, all right,
But
they lost.
But we do have.
Oh, okay, cool.
The ones who be here are the ones who be in the career fair.
Oh, see, there you go. Awesome, like those friendships, right? Okay, wonderful. Thank you, guys. All right. Geraldine, Isabel, if you need anything, I'm gonna put my email in the chat. Thank you, guys. This is the second session for a lot of you guys coming. This is gonna be uploaded eventually to the Career Services Center YouTube channel. I'll put my email in there. Email me that and I can give you the link to the Career Center's YouTube channel where this is gonna be eventually. Probably not until the end of the week. It's just because I have to edit it. Not that there was too many goofs here, but thank you so much. You guys are a really great audience, okay? Take care. You guys have a good day.